So, at this point, I've talked about the RE2, RE3, and Resident Evil 7 VR mods, and let me tell you, they are all great in their own particular little ways, because each of them makes the game that they're a part of better. They just absolutely do. And maybe Resident Evil 7, out of all of them, benefits the most, because it has the most that was already there for VR to begin with. But here we are, finally. At the most recent release, the biggest deal in VR modding for quite some time. Resident Evil 8 in VR. And let me tell you, it is everything I could have hoped for and more. Because as I've said time and time again, the one thing that VR really honestly benefits from more than flat screen gaming ever can or will is visual fidelity. And honestly, I think we've kind of reached a point where it's difficult for me, at least, to look at a game from even 5 years ago and compare it to a game made yesterday and really see all that much of a difference. I think a great example of this is something like comparing Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring. Does Dark Souls 3 really look all that much worse than Elden Ring, despite the fact that it came out quite some time ago? Not really. If anything, it kind of has its own style that maybe even looks better at sometimes. So, why the dedication to visual fidelity then? Why this constant pushing of graphics that makes the need for hardware go up and up? Well, in traditional gaming spaces, I honestly don't have a particularly good answer for you, but in VR, that additional little bit of polish here and there, that tiny little tuning of fidelity, really honestly makes a huge amount of difference. I walked out of the beginning area of Resident Evil 8 with my jaw agape, absolutely astounded to look upon the castle Demetres. It's honestly a magical experience to see that in VR, and even the part before it just looks so damn good. It's difficult to describe because, quite frankly, you just can't see it in video. You can't see it in a recording. But honestly, it's spectacular. And of course, this VR mod comes out at a particularly good time, since Resident Evil 8 has recently received a patch to have even more options to increase your graphical fidelity. I mean, it's probably one of the only games in VR that I've seen that has the option to view ray tracing. And honestly, I still have a bit of a hard time telling when ray tracing is on or off. Quite frankly, I think even in VR, the difference is extremely subtle at best. But it does genuinely lend a certain realism to the lighting in a scene. I think it makes light in particular reflect off of objects a lot more effectively, which I guess is largely the point. And is it worth the cost to frame rate that comes with turning ray tracing on? Probably not. But that being said, it does just make it that next level of immersive. It does add just that tiny bit more to scenes if you have the setup to, not tank your frame rate when you turn RTX on. And honestly, there's just so much fun to be had here. The perspective of looking up at Lady Demetres, it's really quite something, honestly. I honestly didn't get a perspective for just quite how tall and imposing a figure she was in the standard version, but here, damn, you get to see every bit of those 9 feet, and yeah, just like everything else in this game, it's really something to see someone that massive standing in front of you. Resident Evil 8 also works a bit better in VR, even Resident Evil 7 did, because it does less cheating in the cutscenes. Resident Evil 2 and 3 in particular have a lot of camera tricks where it'll cut away from a perspective or something just as it moves out of frame, only for it to teleport back in, or the opposite. You'll look back and see nothing there, only for an enemy to teleport in. And, it does remove the sense of realism quite a bit. And Resident Evil 8 does that a little bit here and there, but generally, character models are animated even in parts of the cutscene you aren't meant to see, and don't just teleport or fade out of existence the second they leave the peripheral field of view that the intended standard performance is meant to view. So you can actually look around in cutscenes and not just be constantly pulled out of that scene because you see a character just kind of floating off into nowhere. As you would often in especially Resident Evil 2 and 3, and a little bit in Resident Evil 7. All of the previous praise that I've heaped upon the other RE games also comes into effect here, especially all the praise for Resident Evil 7 that I had. The controls just feel so nice. The ability to just reach over your back and heal yourself by pulling out a bottle of Healy juice is just so nice and so fluid. It does make the game a little bit more difficult, not just being able to do that by pressing a button, but I feel, again, like it was in RE7, on the balance of things, that mostly works out, because the game is, on the whole, quite a lot easier when you can manually aim the weapons yourself and don't have to deal with as much spread as you can more precisely and quickly get the sights of your weapons on the enemy's head. It does make the game this nice little balance of being easier to dispatch enemies, but being more difficult once you do start making mistakes, so that when enemies are able to challenge you effectively, you can find yourself dying very, very quickly. And of course, you can still do the thing where you just put your hands out to block enemy attacks. All of it just works so well, so intuitively, and so naturally. It really, really honestly adds a lot to the combat of the game and just makes it so enjoyable. As a result of that, I would recommend playing on higher difficulties. I do think that the lower difficulties pose just too little of a challenge for how much easier it is to dispatch your foes with VR precision. All that being said, I really honestly do think that Resident Evil 8 is the best VR mod out there. It gets to use all of the wonderful things that came along with the RE7 mod as well, but it just really honestly cranks up the visuals to the point where, at least at times, you can completely lose yourself in the spaces. There were so often that I would just look off into the distance and just spend a good amount of time staring and absorbing the environment, because the sound design is so strong and the visual design is so strong. When you put on the headset, it honestly is just one of the best VR games that I think that I've played, in terms of how much you feel like you're there because of how well the graphics are tuned to accomplish exactly that. It honestly shows how much this whole VR modding endeavor really is a tremendously, fantastically good idea, because if more games just had this support, I would have so much more reason to replay them, to re-experience them, and re-enjoy them, because it just honestly adds so much. And if I were to say anything in favor of Resident Evil 7 being superior to this, the only thing that Resident Evil 8 didn't get that RE7 did was RE8 didn't get all of the DLC and support and extras, so you don't get with it the amount of additional modes and other ways to enjoy and experience the game that you do with Resident Evil 7. And quite frankly, I am very, very sad that we don't get to punch things with a big old angry power fist in any part of Resident Evil 8. But putting that aside, it is easily in my mind, without a doubt, the best VR mod conversion that exists at the moment. And I just can't recommend that you play it enough if you have any interest in this scene whatsoever. Yeah, it just converts to VR so well, because it uses so many of the similar conventions that Resident Evil 7 did, and Resident Evil 7 was designed for VR. So it's just perfect, honestly. So yeah, that's pretty much all I really have to say about Resident Evil 8. I haven't posted a little while because I went on vacation for a week, and then as a result of going on vacation, got the disease, that disease. And if I sound a little weird in this, that's why, because I'm still a little bit, still got a little bit of tickle in the throat, and it's hard to avoid coughing throughout all this. So that's been really fun for me. Yeah, so I finally got back up to the point where I felt I could get something out. So here we are, and I think that I should be getting back to more regular uploads from here on out. And yeah, hopefully we'll keep this thing going. See where it goes. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I gotta say. Bye now.